Welcome to the Teacher's Lounge, and I'm your host, Christy Lozano. We'll talk education, we'll talk politics, we'll talk about what's going on in Santa Barbara County, problem solve, try to find some solutions, and see if we can change this downward spiral we have in the education system and all the things that are feeding into it. Let's get started. Well, Stephen, welcome to the Teacher's Lounge.
Thank you, Christy. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I've been a public school teacher for about the last 33 years, and I've been a huge critic of public education. And with that comes what's downstream from public education, which is politics. I'm not very political, but with education, I'm learning what goes on in the political sphere, and I think that's why we're here today.
Absolutely. I've never been a politician, nor have I ever wanted to run. But when I saw what was happening in schools, I figured the quickest way to fix it was to get elected so that I could help change some of the policy and the procedures for what is I see coming straight out of politics into the schools. So that was just one strategy that I chose to try to be able to make those changes.
That's a really great point, Christy, because I so admire your courage getting out there in the public square and putting yourself out there, going against the mainstream. And what you said is so important because really politics should be downstream from education. But as you just said, now education is downstream from politics.
Right.
And they are dumping sewage into our schools. And that's
Yes.
why we're here today.
That's right. That's right. We have to talk about it. We have to bring awareness to it. Awareness is the first part of change, and it might even be half the battle. For people to not think of school as they once knew it is very difficult because they remembered a certain way and they have to understand it's not that way anymore. And then the other thing I think is it's hard to actually believe that people would lie to you. And I know that that's a difficult thing for people to wrap their brain around, but a lot of these people are lying. And the way that you know someone's lying is you listen to their words and you watch their actions and you see if they match. And you see, even some of the intentions, this is what we're going to do with your money. Do they actually do it? What is the outcome? Here in Santa Barbara, they were going to bring just communities in to address racism. And racism has progressively gotten worse. So it's the exact opposite of what they said. And that's how you know it's a lie.
That's right. And I was going to take it one step further. I love what you said. But in a real education, the first order of business, as you also just said, is to know what is. First, we must know. And when we know the truth, we must love the truth. And because we love it, we must serve it. But what we've seen in the public square, in politics, and in the schools is that they've inverted that order. And now school children are required to serve the agenda. They might come to love it. And then in loving this false, twisted agenda, they come to think they know a thing. And it's all upside down. So when you said that we have to listen to what people say and watch what they do and compare them, I would take it one step further and say, and we have to compare that to the objective standard of reality and the good to measure whether or not, even if what they're saying and doing is consistent, if it's not good or true, we must reject it.
Yeah, good. That's why it's good to come to the table and discuss these things, because that's actually the beauty of education. That's why kids could come to a classroom and work with a teacher, because there's a lot of brilliance born in the conversation and in the dynamic of the classroom. And so while we don't like what's happening, there is learning taking place. It just doesn't happen to be about the things that are going to bring a brighter future for children. And I think it's going to bring much worse than that, but we don't have to get into that right now.
Oh, I want to get into it, but we don't have.
Yeah.
So true, though. So
yeah.
true.
Yeah. So I've recently decided to run for County Board of Education here in Santa Barbara. I previously in 2022 ran for Superintendent of Schools, which is a very important position. I would say one of the most powerful positions in Santa Barbara County. because the superintendent has sole ability to sign off on funds that go into our schools that are paying for a lot of these things. They're generally the LCAP funds, plus there are other funds, but she has sole discretion. The school board doesn't even have oversight over those funds. I mean, they have oversight, but they don't sign off on it. So for somebody to have that much power to put millions of dollars into each of these school districts to fund, you know, something, a manual this thick that nobody wants to read to actually see what's in it, is hugely powerful. Equally as powerful is sitting on the board and being able to affect what goes on at the county level. You know, I think just in the fact that the first thing that happened during my campaign for superintendent was that they sued me to get me off the ballot tells you we are over a huge target. That lawsuit came from Sacramento, from the public former superintendent of public instruction. And in my simple explanation, it is a huge vacuum sucking taxpayer dollars out of our counties. And nobody wants to tell schools no. So it's a huge vacuum, especially when schools are failing. They can disguise it under that. And then people want to give. And it's really criminal what has taken place. So I think that running for school board and stopping this vacuum is super important, as well as probably running for city council, who's trying to destroy housing in Santa Barbara. So, so with that in mind, I went to, you know, see about getting some endorsements, and a nonpartisan group reached out to me. It is called the Women's Political Committee of Santa Barbara. And they asked if I would be seeking an endorsement from them. And, you know, it's a nonpartisan committee. And so I thought, yeah, I need to be endorsed by nonpartisan and even partisan. It's a nonpartisan position, but who doesn't love kids? Who doesn't want the best for kids? I would think most organizations would want the best for kids. And so they reached out to me, they gave me a phone call and said, hey, would you like to do this? I said, sure, I'd love to see what it takes to get your endorsement. And they said, well, first of all, you have to go on our website and you have to look at all of our values and you must align with our values. And I said, okay, what's next? And she said, you have to tell me that you align with all of our values, and then I will send you a questionnaire. You'll fill out the questionnaire, send it back to me. We'll review it. If we like what we see, we'll call you in for an interview. Our panel will interview you, and then we'll make a recommendation to the board. So the board doesn't do the interview. There's some people in the middle that do the interview, and then they make their recommendation to the board. Sounds like a pretty big process. And then the board would decide. And so I said, okay. So she said, you know, check out our website and see if you align with our values. And I was just going to go over some of these values. Have you had a chance to take a look at the website?
I have had a chance. I looked at it and I was utterly intrigued when I saw the incongruency of the word nonpartisan and then the nature of their values. So yeah, I got to look at them, and there's 5 things we're going to discuss today, it looks like.
Yeah, actually, there is the Los Angeles committee, and there is also the Santa Barbara.
Ah.
And so make sure you're looking at Santa Barbara, because that's where
okay.
It's actually much deeper than
The LA?
than LA.
How do I find the Santa Barbara? Because I am looking at the
It's sbwpc.org.
Really?
And this is headed up by Paula Lopez, who was a news anchor here in Santa Barbara for a lot of years.
I found it. Okay.
And when I asked the lady who called me, I said, it looks to me like you primarily endorse Democrats. Do you endorse people from other parties? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, okay. Because I don't really see any of those on there. And she goes, well, usually they don't come seeking our endorsements because they don't align with our values. So, it's kind of one of those things like I would like to see an actual nonpartisan list of values and compare it to this group's nonpartisan list of values because the things that I see here, they actually look very progressively left. And I don't even think there's Democrats that would agree to all of these things.
Right.
Inclusive, intersectional, progressive, feminist values.
Yeah.
They acknowledge that Black women, Indigenous women, women of color have historically been disproportionately impacted by misogyny, sexism, racism, and other systems of oppression. Which that's a lot of strong statements.
Right.
I mean, we know those things exist, but on a generalized level, at some point it's considered reverse racism because you're applying that across the board and you're not taking it on a case by case basis.
Well, I think it's a lot worse than that, Christy. If you look at this, and this is the first time I've seen this, I was looking at the LA version, which looks tame compared to this. I'm very surprised what's in front of me right now. I mean, and you use the word progressive. I'm not sure if that's an insult to the progressive movement, but they say inclusive, intersectional, progressive, feminist values. That's a mouthful. I mean, that alone is worth looking at if we know what those words mean. The inclusive is obviously from the DEI inclusive, isn't it?
Their definition of feminism, the doctrine advocating that social, political, racial, economic, and all other rights of women be equal to those of men, quote, women, those who self-identify as women. I don't even know what that means.
You've got to watch the movie What is a Woman to figure out what that means.
Oh, I did see that. So they don't know what a woman is, but as long as you identify as a woman, you're part of the club.
Yikes.
Which is very interesting to me because then they would be allowing a man into their club under the guise of a woman, which is the very thing they've been fighting all of this time.
That's right.
So it actually makes no sense to me.
It's a complete contradiction to claim equality, to claim exclusivity, to claim inclusivity, and then to claim someone who identifies as a woman who is part of the excluded party can be in the party. It is a wash with
it's like an elitist women's group that men can join.
Yeah. Men, yeah, but they're not allowed.
Right. Unless they let them. Unless they stamp, give a stamp of approval for this particular type.
Right.
I mean, that to me is racist.
Well, think of the word inclusive as well, because as you look down this list, Christy, are you included?
I don't think so because, well, I'm not Black or an Indigenous or a person of color. I'm not non-binary. Let's see. I have to support abortion. At whatever terms they define, because there's a spectrum of that, and they want to be in the extreme of that, and it's like not even being able to have a rational conversation. I can have a rational conversation about abortion. I can have a rational conversation about racism. I can have a rational conversation. Those things do exist, but it's on a case by case basis. Otherwise, it's being applied in a general manner, and that in and of itself is stereotyping.
Yeah.
Which they say they don't like, but then they do it. So you can't have both. Pick one. Either you don't like it or you do it. Yeah. And if you do it, you must like it. Yeah. That's black or white.
Well, tremendous irony with systems of oppression. Like you said, that is a broad and sweeping generalization and a stereotype. And yet that's exactly what they're doing. They're making broad and sweeping generalizations about all men, all women. It's absolutely insane what they're doing because of the contradictory nature of it.
Hmm. So, I don't know, there's probably a psychological term for somebody. I always saw it as a teacher, right? You're watching a kid do something, they're, throwing rocks at somebody, and you say, stop throwing rocks. And they're like, I wasn't throwing rocks. And I'm like, no, I saw you throwing rocks. I wasn't throwing rocks. And they think that that has become a thing.
Right.
I see people do that all the time. If
Mm.
I just say it's not, then it's not. And they expect me to go along with it.
Yeah.
And when you're based in reality and truth, you don't go along with it because you know what you saw.
Right.
And so for some people, it is important for them to kind of anchor themselves in truth. Sometimes you have to anchor yourself in truth. Sometimes you have to do things so that you know what you see is true, so that when they say it's not true, you have something, a leg to stand on.
Right.
That's actually a very important skill for developing the ability to have courage or to stand against something. Maybe sometimes you have to take notes. Sometimes you have to record the whatever it is you're doing so that when you go back and you listen to it, you know what is true, because it's sort of pathological to, gaslighting, to
Yes.
do something and then say, I didn't do it, and then think that that's going to get you off the hook. But it does. In this culture that we're operating, this culture of deception and lying and manipulation, that is one of their tactics.
That's right.
Do
It's
that.
it's their major tactic. And you could ask them, and you got Christy, if they excluded you, the reason they would do it is because your ideas, what you believe, conflicts with their gaslighting. And
Hmm.
you say you're inclusive. Why wouldn't you include me? And I'd be curious to what they'd say, but the only thing they would have is some non-being unreality answer for you.
Right. And in this case of seeking their endorsement, I exclude myself because I'm a person of truth and honor. And they know that. And me and anybody like me, I'm not just saying me, but I'm just saying, if they tell me to go to their website and then I have to look at these values, which, they have values on human rights, civil rights, equal opportunity. They have strategy. They have anti-racism information.
Right.
They have childcare and early childhood education, crimes against women. They talk about educational equity, the environment, equal rights, gender identity, gun violence, healthcare, housing, immigration, international peace and security, reproductive justice, sexual orientation, woman in the workplace. I mean, this is a long list. And to me, only a robot would agree with all those, because we all have different opinions about everything. That's what is the best thing about America is, and freedom of speech is the freedom to have a different opinion, and there's varied opinions. And so to actually say that these people that they endorse go along with it, they might, but they've tied their hands behind their back and put a muzzle over their mouth. And that's who, so you look at the list, Greg Hart, Laura Capps, these are all people that are in lockstep with each other. So yeah, yep, those are their values, and that's what they do. And it's totally unreasonable and ridiculous that, and because I'm a truthful person, I'm not going to seek their endorsement, because hardly anybody goes along with all those values. Men,
Right.
I can't imagine a man going along with all that.
I want to know from you, Christy, is there a single one that you can go along with? You looked at them all.
Let's see. Let's look at we'll pick some like reasonable ones, like educational equity.
Yes.
All individuals have the right to a quality, accessible, equitable public education. The experiences, strengths, and needs of girls and women from diverse backgrounds, including race, ethnicity, class, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, age, and ability, must be included and celebrated to promote excellence and equity for all students. All students must see themselves reflected and valued in teaching and learning. We support ethnic studies curricula for all students and the inclusion of contributions of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Education at all levels must be accessible, equitable, and free from bias, censorship, and discrimination, including discrimination based on hairstyles and religious faith and dress. We demand equitable and responsible funding for all levels of education. Students of color experience institutional barriers resulting in continuing achievement opportunity gap. These barriers include insufficient public school resources. There is a lot of resources in the schools, so that is not a true statement. Lowered academic expectations. That is currently what's happening. That is currently what the school district is doing. These people should be all over the superintendent, all over, because they're the ones doing this. Let's see. Disproportionate discipline. They're not doing any discipline. So we can't even talk about disproportionate since they're doing none. We're committed to the elimination of obstacles that impede anyone from obtaining a quality public education, including systemic racism, sexism, or income inequality. We oppose the use of public funds for non-public education. So what's very interesting about this, they must be doing nothing. Because all the things they mentioned, if they were for it, they'd be down there storming the halls. They'd be sitting in the parking lot with me, calling into the school board and having a fit. And I've never seen these people. I've never seen Paul Lopez, the president of this club, down there doing any of those things.
Right. But the question,
I agree on some level, but they're not actually, it's twisted. There are some of the things, but they're being allowed to happen and nobody's there, you know, it's the opposite is actually happening of what they say they're for. So it's, you know, kind of a crazy.
let me take it further. If you look at the frame of all those things, some of those things sound nice, but if you know what they mean by them, do you think there's any of those points that you would actually go along with? As I read it, and I understand what they mean by these because I've been in public education for 33 years, I don't think any of those things are appropriate, even if a couple of them sound appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, all students are, you know, should have equal opportunity. Yes, they should. And that is a part of the culture of a school. If the culture of a school makes opportunity available, then kids have to be part of that process and they have to be desiring that opportunity, because we know we've had kids in schools that don't take advantage of the opportunity. It's not that they don't have the opportunity, it's that for whatever reason, they don't take advantage of it.
Right, but look at how they snuck the word equitable in there. And what they mean by equity is an equality of outcomes. And the truth is, nobody on planet Earth has a right to the equality of outcomes, even if it is true that in this country, we ought to provide a quality, accessible public education. Those are true, but equitable is not true. There's no such right. In fact, that's a political evil. Everyone should have the same outcome, because just like you said, if you have the desire, if you have communities where families don't care, there's nothing the state can do about that.
Right. Right. And everybody has different gifts and abilities and creativities. And so if the opportunities are there, they can, you know, they're going to take those routes and advantage of those things, and they're going to go all different ways. It's never going to be, nobody's, you know, some kids are going to be more academic. Some kids are going to be more athletic. Some kids are going to be more musical. Some kids, you know, and that's the beautiful thing of a school. It's like everybody kind of doing their thing and it working together to make for a place that's flourishing. It makes for a place that's healthy environment, makes for a place where there's all kinds of different cool things coming out of it. And to make it equitable is to lower the bar to zero so that, there's no expectation, nobody's going to feel bad.
That's right. And that's what's happened. And this word equity, educational equity, even though this is the one that sounds the best, the equity destroys the good meaning of the word diversity. We love the diversity of talent, of intelligence, of ability, because this makes a community beautiful. And even reject that by saying everyone should have equal outcomes. Possible. So the entire section's framed in that equity of outcomes. And if there's a disparity in outcomes, then through envy and greed, that disparity, whoever has more, so to speak, gets attacked. It's even this one that looks good is
yeah. So we have to ask ourselves, what does this group actually do? What do they do?
What do they do?
I mean, is it a club where they go have coffee or wine, or they hang out and bash anybody they don't like? Is it a mean girl club?
I wonder.
I mean, that's what I'd call it. I'd call it a mean girl club.
I wonder if we can interview some of their representatives.
Yeah, maybe Paula would give us an interview. Let's see who's on the board.
I wonder if they would maybe define some terms for us. We could go through some of these values.
I have a feeling that might be difficult to ask. Paula Lopez, 9th generation, Santa Barbara native. We have Dana Goba, vice president. She was born and raised in Detroit. She moved to Santa Barbara in 2002, working for a nonprofit. Okay, so nonprofit is always a red flag for me.
Right.
We have over 2,000 nonprofits in Santa Barbara. And that is what's funding, in my opinion, a lot of what's going on around us.
Right.
Then we have Hannah Sullivan. She's the vice president of policy. She sounds like she was a Goleta native, went to Dos Pueblos, got her bachelor's of art in political science from Sacramento State. Oh, representative for former state senator Hannah Beth Jackson. You know what's interesting about Hannah Beth Jackson is we did a Title IX event back in June, and we had a bunch of coaches and athletes come out to support and speak at the event. And they were talking about this thing between men and women and men in the girls' locker rooms. Hannah Beth Jackson should be all over that, to me, as a feminist. She didn't say one word. She was there in silence. She approached Riley Nuschel and gave her a business card, and that was it. And it's like, where are these women? Where are these women that fought for equal rights, women's rights? Where are they now? Where are they right now as, men are trying to shower with girls in locker rooms and competing against them in sports? Where are they now? What are they doing?
Yeah.
Why are they silent?
It's an incredible thing. And I think it's tied to this value down here called gender identity. This agendized gender thing is worth addressing. They say they advocate for full equity and equality for all people of all gender identities. So the question is, what does that mean? I think the number's up to upwards of 100 different genders they're claiming can be identified. Correct? And they support programs that include that. And I think that's the gateway into having men in women's sports, men in women's locker rooms, which I find abhorrent. I have daughters. I would be horrified if I went into my daughter's locker room. Where's the outrage from men on that? That's crazy, actually. It's so disrespectful to women.
It is.
It's shocking. Yeah.
It is. And it's shocking that they go along with this.
Yes.
I was just looking at their list of board members. We have Rachel Ahrens, who's a psychotherapist who's been in private practice for over 40 years, specializes working with trauma and attachment wounds. it's interesting to me, these psychotherapists and all this, social emotional learning and all this, mind stuff.
Yeah.
Because to say a lot of these, to even say there's something more than a man or a woman, to me, is to discount the truth and to mess with people's minds.
That's right.
But we have a lot of counselors, psychotherapists, you know, uh, just it's like on and on and on, and it's like, well, what's happening to our minds here?
Right.
Is
They're
anybody aware of that?
That's right. The psychologists are leading the charge in what you and I both know simply is an unreality. The word identity means sameness. It's about being an ontology. And there's only male and female. If a man were convinced that he's a woman, that woman convinced that he is not an identity. It's a disorder. It's a delusion. It's a non-being, because it's impossible for a man to be a woman, because that's not his identity.
Right. And to affirm him in that is the exact opposite of what a counselor or good psychotherapist is supposed to do.
Absolutely.
We're supposed to help him grapple with why he feels that way, what happened to him. There's usually a cause, there's usually a root,
Yeah.
or multiple roots.
Sure.
I was in a film called The Gender Transformation Untold Stories, and there was a man in there, he was in his 80s, and he decided to become a woman in his 40s after he was married and after he had 2 sons. And he spent 8 years as a woman. I don't think he had the surgery, but I think he had some. But he had a counselor. The counselor was the one that scooted him on down the road and to walk into that. He spent 8 years. He got a good counselor after that, actually a Christian counselor. And that counselor helped him get to the root cause. And there's 3 causes. One, his grandmother made these dresses, and when he was 4 years old, he wanted to try them on. And she made him a dress and she let him try it on. And then he liked it. And it's like dress up. It's like play. It's like not a big deal. If you don't make a big deal about it, it's not a big deal. It's when you make a big deal that it becomes one. And so he took the dress home, and then one day his dad came home and found him wearing the dress and overreacted and beat him up, like spanked him with a board or something crazy. So that caused trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And then third, he had an uncle who was adopted and saw him in the dress and sexually abused him. And so it was like those 3 things and worked in combination with each other. And when he kind of got to the root of that and the counselor could acknowledge his pain and how all of those things really hurt him. And the other thing was, when his dad found the dress, he wouldn't let him see his grandmother. So then that relationship was torn from him.
Right.
That was an important relationship because she made him feel good and beautiful and whatever. And it wasn't about the dress. It was just about his identity and feeling like a good human.
Right.
And but when the counselor could get to that and then actually forgive those people for hurting him, he found freedom in that, which released him from his pain and his suffering. And he went back to being a man, and he even started an organization so that he could help others.
Good.
Kind of, resolve that, not carry it with him through the rest of his life. And I think in so many of these cases, that would be, it's not going to be the same situation. It's going to be a little different in each situation.
Sure.
But you can only talk one-on-one with people and really help them by understanding. Doesn't mean you have to say they're wrong. Just understand where they're coming from and why they feel that way, and then help them work through it.
Right.
And that's what these counselors aren't doing. They're not skilled, and they're skilled in, taking people down the wrong road, and that's what they're doing. And
Right.
so, and I think there's maybe an absence of people who know how to do what I just talked about, and that is go to the pain, help, relieve the pain for the person, acknowledge it, and do the things that need to be done to address it, and then help them out of it.
That's right.
And that's loving. That's actually loving them.
Yeah, to identify someone's wounds and difficulties and grieve the loss, grieve the suffering, one and deal with that. But modern psychologists in general drive people deeper into the delusions that flow from wounds. This is highly immoral and highly unethical to take already really wounded people,
Yep.
them in a direction that's going to wound them further and in
Yes.
cases permanently.
Yeah. Talk about victimizing a victim.
Exactly.
That's what they're doing. Second person on their board is EJ has been a political activist since she graduated from UCSB in 1958.
Wow.
And she's a retired teacher of 40 plus years.
Wow.
But they're nonpartisan, right?
Yeah.
Besides serving on this board, she is on the Democratic Women's Board and is an elected official of the Democratic Central Committee.
Wow.
Is there an agenda?
That.
Let's see. Next person on the board, Tish Gainey, longtime resident of Santa Barbara. She worked as a project director for a firm producing children's television programming and multimedia educational products. She has served on many boards, including the Women's Fund of Santa Barbara. That is probably one of the biggest nonprofits in Santa Barbara that gives money for all this social justice, DEI garbage.
Right.
She's, let's see, the Greater Santa Barbara Ad Club, the Cecilia Fund, the Santa Barbara Education Foundation, and Leadership Roundtable of Thrive. She's a member of Social Venture Partners, where she's been a fast pitch coach. Adverse childhood experiences and capacity building for the local nonprofit Just Communities. Oh, perfect. Just Communities.
Just Communities, one of the most racist pedagogical organizations in America.
And took lots of money out of Santa Barbara School District.
$1 million at least.
Yep. Then we have Elsa Granados, and she served as a member of the executive committee in the capacity of vice president. She has also served as chair of the elections and appointments and outreach committees. She participated on the fund development, candidate development, and membership committees. She sounds very political. Has a BA in psychology. Is there a theme here?
Pattern here?
And public administration. She has served as the executive director of the Santa Barbara Rape Crisis Center.
Interesting.
She has been a member of the board of directors of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault and the Fund for Santa Barbara. So they're getting their board members out of the same pot.
That's right.
We have Lisa Gurovitz. She served on the board 22 years in a variety of positions. She's a lifelong feminist who loves working with such dynamic, diverse groups of women. She served on the Carpinteria Summerlin Fire Board and is currently president of her homeowners association. Carpinteria Seal Watch, Carpenter Beautiful, and as a Medicare counselor.
Oh.
Lisa also enjoys being with her grandchildren. And then we have Heather Hammett is an artist and a mask maker. She has been a social justice activist since 1960s.
Wow.
Awards include 1997 Gay and Lesbian Business Association Humanitarian Award, Public Citizen of the Year, and 2013 Independent Local Hero Award. Karina Zhu. Karina is a graduate of UCSB and Santa Barbara College of Law. She sees her service on the board as complementary to her other community work as Santa Barbara Women's March, the board of Zona Seca, and the Asian American History Committee of the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation. She was a member of the District Election Committee that successfully advocated for district-based elections for Santa Barbara City Council. She is trained as a mediator and been a longtime advocate for restorative justice, bringing speakers and training to the Santa Barbara courts, school districts, and UCSB. She was also involved in creating an elective course in restorative justice at the College of Law. And there's a whole bunch of them.
My goodness. It's an
Well,
army.
you know, I think at the root of what we're talking about is there's people, I think primarily, that get involved in these things because they've had a bad experience.
Right.
They have felt like, uh, left out, or there's not a place at the table for them, or, bad things have happened. They had to fight their way up, they had to fight their way out. But I would say that that is that's a life. It's kind of a mindset. When you've had to work your way out of maybe being a victim to overcoming obstacles in your life, that could be applied to so many areas of our life. You could apply it to athletics. You could apply it to, getting scholarships in school. You could apply it to just getting a public education where your parents weren't able to get an education, and now you are able to. So it's a human condition that some people don't do it and some people do it. But if you are an overcomer, why would you try to burn those around you when you're able to do that? Why wouldn't you? Martin Luther King, he was trying to help those people around him because he was speaking to the truth of the matter. It's not the color of your skin, but the content of your character. Why are we not talking about character? Because character really is what we should be looking at right now. Is this person doing good, or is this person hurting people?
That's right.
And there are people doing good, and they're called racists and homophobes and, all kinds of names, white supremacists, and they're doing good. And there are people doing bad, and they're called, heroes and, whatever term. And and you have to look at what they're doing to call it good or bad.
That's right. You have to compare it to objective reality. I can look at this list as anyone can and see that on each point, if they endorse this, they are literally victimizing other people.
Mm-hmm.
And they've decided for themselves who deserves to be victimized. In accord with true justice, not social justice, which is wokeness, in accord to true justice, we don't have the right to harm other people. We don't have the right to victimize other people. And you can read through every one of these things and identify the group they hate, the group they want to victimize, and the group they falsely blame for their own personal shortcomings.
Right. And so what does that make them? An elitist?
Well, it's very complicated. If you look at the root psychological cause, you have a vital question. Is man fallen, or is man born perfect? The assumption of people like this in this group is that man is born perfect and deserves no discomfort, no difficulty, no challenges. They assume for themselves they have that right. And they say if it's not perfect, then they need something external to blame. And there's no questions of character that you brought up, because really character is the objective in authentic education, to cultivate virtue. They are exactly the opposite, because they believe man is not fallen, because they believe they have a right to perfection and excellence and comfort. And it's a really distorted and inverted worldview, because there's not a person on planet Earth who hasn't suffered from the fall.
So who has allowed them to come from this place of privilege? Because the very thing that they want to, beat down and say that, white people or white men or even white women, come from a place of privilege.
Yeah.
Why are they exercising privilege? Did somebody hand them something and say, do my bidding?
Yeah, somebody did. We don't need to mention that here, but it is pure self-arrogated, undeserved privilege that they claim. This has to be understood. They have no right. In fact, arrogating to themselves this right to privilege they don't have, they use the word privilege to disparage those who may or may not have privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think these people know what the word privilege means. But privilege is a very important word, and it's not demonic. But it's ironic that they're claiming an illegitimate privilege while castigating others who may have privilege or may not, but it would be legitimate in the ones they criticize.
Right. So at the root of social justice, what I have seen is that whoever it is that handed them this privilege or spoke this privilege to them is probably the very same person who acknowledged their pain,
Ah,
said, I see you, and you need to become something, and I believe in you. But they're doing it in a wicked way, in a
mhm.
way of manipulating them and then using them for this thing that they want to push forward. And they're foisting it on children in schools.
Right.
And, I think anybody, they're a traumatized individual. If you acknowledge somebody who has had trauma, you acknowledge their pain, they're going to listen because they want that
Right.
acknowledged,
That's
you
right.
know? So I would say from the message for those of us that understand this thing that's going on, we have to come in with something better.
Yeah.
We actually, part of the solution is to come in and to bring love and to bring
Truth.
truth and to kind of win them back from the dark side. It's like they're kind of getting sucked into this dark side. And if we could actually provide that in a genuine and truthful way, it might actually undo kind of the claws that are in them. It might actually get them to release those claws and actually kind of like this man who spent 8 years as a woman, actually address the pain, actually give them something that they need. And I know, like in my race for a superintendent or to be on the school board, I would want to acknowledge those things
Sure.
because it's really healing. And it's like you feel hopeless, but we can bring hope. There is a way out. There is a way to deal with these things. There is a future ahead of them. And probably one of the biggest things is it's not going to come from the outside. It's
Right.
going to actually come from the inside.
That's
And
right.
seeing what you're made of and finding your identity and the gifts that were placed inside of you and heal the wounds and the brokenheartedness and whatever's gone on so that you can overcome that and go help others or do something productive, find an amazing job, provide for a family, have a family. There's a lot that a lot of positive things that can come from, looking at something that's painful and hard.
That's right. And you bring up so many good points. And you're really talking about the specific people who drew these people into this sort of mental illness and
Mhm.
malevolence. And that's real. All those people that draw them in are groomers. And
Mhm.
like you said, they've affirmed the pain and suffering and assured them that it wasn't their fault, assured them that they're victims, assured them that there is an external force that can heal them. And they made false promises on that regard. And SEL, social emotional learning, is a communist indoctrination. It's a technique, it's a tool. When you get people to focus just on their emotions and assure them that nothing is their responsibility,
Mhm.
our egos eat it up. And it brings up this concept of social justice. Social justice is a neologism, it's not even a real concept because justice is a social virtue. To say social justice, like social justice. In reality, it's been turned on its head. Justice means what I owe to the other.
Mm.
Social justice means what's owed to me. It's
Mhm.
narcissistic, selfish, and
Mhm.
dreadful ideology, but people fall for it because woke feels good. Building character is about suffering. And
Mhm.
side better. So you're either going to get short-term pathological gain for long-term corruption and
Yep.
evil,
Mhm.
or get short-term pain and suffering for long-term gain, coherence, ethical integrity, and all the things that matter. And you're so right. We can draw people into back with truth, but so many of these groomers have done such a great job. It's really difficult. So if we think about a man wooing a young maiden to marry him. That's one thing. What we're trying to do is we're trying to lure an embittered divorcee back into a proper marriage.
Mm-hmm.
That's a quite a bit harder job.
Mm-hmm.
I got that from C.S. Lewis, by the way. I thought it was a helpful because we're dealing with a lot.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I guess the question is, do you want to feel better? Do you want to feel better? Because there is a way to feel better, but it's going to be by looking at the problem and finding a solution. And it takes time. But to me, that's the most productive, freeing thing, is to see that hope and to go towards it and to see what's possible and to experience, a freeing inside. Because when you walk around bitter and, blaming and all of those things, you have no power.
Yeah.
You actually gain power by choosing to forgive,
Yeah.
by choosing to, overcome, and by choosing to learn. There's always a silver lining in suffering, because it is what forms our character. You can't form good character without, iron sharpening iron. You can't form it without coconut or palm trees cannot get strong without the wind blowing them around and their roots growing deep. And those movies that we love to watch, I saw one recently, The Girl in the Sea. It was about a girl that swam across the English Channel, and she was challenged in so many ways, and she had so many people coming against her. Her own coach was going against her. But what a beautiful testimony and story when she actually makes it.
Yeah.
And in a way that never should have happened. And we love watching those stories, or hearing those stories, those true stories, because there's something inside of us that wants that for ourselves.
Right.
We want that strength of character to be able to, it doesn't have to be on that crazy level. I could see it in my little PE students, that developing part, that developing grit, resiliency, long suffering, toughness. It's what people in the military have or used to have. It's a beautiful thing. It's what Olympians have. It's why people love to watch the Olympics, because they've pressed in and they've overcome. And so, for anybody who's kind of stuck in that, it's like, no, there's freedom. You can get out of it.
That's
You don't
right.
have to stay there. And a lot of these counselors are either grooming or they suffer from it themselves.
Yes.
So
And
they
they're
go around acknowledging it and justifying it, using, clients to do so.
That's right. And I was going to say, I love everything you said. And I take a little bit of a different approach. I say, if you want to do the right thing, you're gonna feel worse. But the question is, do you want to be better? And if you do, you need to make the end of what you're striving for to be a virtuous thing that builds up a soul.
Yeah.
Counselors, they provide a vicious thing that degrades the soul.
Yep.
So even if they feel good about what the psychologist does to them and convinces them, if it's mutilating surgery or harmful drugs, they feel great about it because they've been convinced that's the path to happiness. But it's misery. So we start in suffering with the effort we have to make, but we aim at what's good and true. And you suffer now, but you will be liberated, just like you said. And it's the triumph of the spirit. I just want to, that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of in conclusion, I'm not sure what this women's political group, I think they're doing the very things you just described. Are they adding, or are they making things worse for those people around them? And maybe they feel some power. They feel power of, being on a committee and sitting in meetings and talking about these things and raising money and giving money and, whatever it is they do. But are they adding to our society, or are they destroying? And
it's before we wrap up, though, I did want to address one of their probably biggest, major, most profound themes, and they would use the abuse speech of reproductive rights, but that is their main thing, is that they want abortions to be safe and effective. which it's not safe or effective really for anybody. And I,
Not the baby.
yeah, well, it's certainly not for the baby. It's mortal for the baby, but it's also permanently damaging for a woman who, for some wildly unintelligible reason, has been convinced by this society and like from women like this that if she murders her own child, that that's a good.
Mm-hmm.
A woman will at some point after that kind of horrendous experience have a breakdown
Mm-hmm.
because it's natural. A woman was made to love her children.
Mm-hmm.
And the least loving thing you could do is terminate that life willfully in the womb. So if you want to answer the question, is this group promoting good in society?
Yeah.
The answer is no, because no good can come from such an evil act of terminating a innocent child in the womb. I wanted to bring that up. Men aren't supposed to talk about it, but we must talk about it.
Yeah. And, even on any level, there's nothing good about it. I don't think at any point in anyone's life they thought it's good to get an abortion. They might have had to get one because something happened to them. They might have felt like, well, this is the solution. But I'm pretty sure up until recently, it was never called good. It was just a thing that women did. They felt bad about it. They would hid it from their parents. They used to do it in the back room, coat hanger experience, whatever, because it wasn't legalized. And I'm pretty sure there was, for a long time, nothing good about it. So I don't know why we're calling it good.
Yeah. It's
At
a
all.
right
And people can have their varying opinions about the reasons why and morally and all those things, and that's fine. But to call it good at any point, a life, a being that will turn into a life is being destroyed, whether they believe the life starts at conception or anywhere along the way, it is not going to live. So I don't think at any point we would refer to that as good.
I wouldn't think so. It's tremendously harmful to the woman who gets the abortion.
Yeah.
I think that's what women should be concerned about. It's very similar to allowing men to compete in sports, like the two guys that won the boxing and Olympic boxing. That robbed two women of silver and gold medals.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible thing. And
Right.
the process robs women of their own children.
And it inflated two men who couldn't even compete with other men.
Right.
It inflated their egos and their narcissism because they beat women.
Incredible.
Like, really? You feel good about beating women? I don't get that.
The new normal, the new good.
It's not normal.
And it's not.
They want to call it normal, but I'm here to say I disagree. It's not normal at all.
It's objectively not normal.
Right. Right. So, well, it's so good to talk to you, Stephen. Thanks for joining me.
You too, Chris.
And we have a lot to talk about. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and we'll do it again soon.
Good. I can't wait. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, we can stop it there, and maybe I'll have do some little intro thing and attach it to the front.
Yeah, absolutely. That was so great. But I mean, I realized we could do 20 shows on this one document.
Oh, I know.